Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. We're so glad to have you join us, whether you're joining us live right now or checking this out and recording in the future. I'm Jason Van Orden. I'm joined by my friend Amy Woods from Content Tech 10X. We'll introduce ourselves very quickly here in just a moment, but we're here to talk about making your content and messaging more effective at attracting the right clients. So this is especially for anyone who might feel like, hey, I'm not getting the right people on the phone. I'm not getting the right people on my email list. They don't understand the value, or they're not in the right place to be able to pay me, or my service is not quite the right fit. And all of that filtering and attraction of the right clients starts immediately at the beginning with the message you're using to attract them, especially in content, since that's a lot of what we do as coaches and consultants is content marketing, in addition to the other ways that we get our messages out there. So I'm Jason Van Orden, business strategist who helps coaches and consultants to grow their business, unlock that next level of impact and income by helping them to optimize their messaging and their offers to make them more scalable without sacrificing your sanity. How about you, Amy?
Hi, so yep, thank you so much for joining us live. So I'm Amy Woods. I am the founder of Content 10X. So we are all about content repurposing, content marketing. So what I focus on is getting the maximum value from the content that you create. And of course, that content has to be on brand, on message, know your audience, all the things that we're going to talk about today. But yeah, my thing is making your content go further and having good content strategies, knowing your audience, and then making sure that you have great processes in place to make the most of the content that we create. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation today. It's going to be great.
Yeah, and you're really good at all that stuff. So that's why I was looking forward to collaborating with you on this live stream here today. So let's go ahead and let's talk about somebody who is in that situation where they're like, man, I'm just not attracting the right people. So something is off. Well, this is a question I'm going to put forward, and I'd like to hear your perspective first, Amy. It's like, what were some of the first things you might have somebody look at or assess if they come to you like, yeah, something's wrong with my content, not getting the right people?
Yeah, I think if you feel that you are getting the wrong prospects, the wrong people coming to you, then the biggest question first, I think, is why are they wrong? Like, what makes them wrong? And to understand what makes them wrong, you have to know what's right, don't you? So I think it's really a question of revisiting, I think, then what is that ideal client? What is the persona of that ideal client? What are the traits that are making these people wrong as well, to help you even more clearly define who is correct, who is right, who are you trying to reach? So I think, the first step to me, understand those details of who you're trying to attract. Maybe as well, you find that you have more than one, ideal client persona. So, you have perhaps a couple of slightly different offerings that you provide, and that's going to be quite different to that. It solves a different problem, and this is the nuance of that ideal client, and this is the nuances of the other. So yeah, I think first, before you go any further with any further assessment, to validate any assessment that you do, you've got to understand why they're wrong and what makes someone right, don't you? I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, is it that, it seems like nobody has the money, or you're not reaching the buying decision maker, or is it that, your particular approach doesn't seem to align with what exactly they're looking for? So yeah, assessing that first, I love that. And so one thing that I encourage a lot of people to think about is, try to have what I call like these 3 or 4 filter criteria. A lot of times, of course, we have hopefully our ideal client profile that we've done some work on figuring out like what's going on for them. What are they looking for? What's the language you're using? What have they tried before? What are they frustrated with? All that good stuff that we can then infuse into our content. But it's also knowing, often there are just those things, whether it's a certain position they hold, or, I work with a lot of coaches and consultants. So I often ask about the price range of their offers, the size of their list, and not that indicates like their quality as a coach, but it is an indicator for me of like their experience level. And I know I do my best work when people are already at a certain level of experience in their business. So just having those few bullet points that you can address. And so then you can mention that in a headline, in your content, on a form where people are signing up for a call with you. That helps a lot to have those criteria in mind. And the one other thing that I'd say, there's this quote, and I probably mention this just about every workshop or live stream I do because it's so powerful. A quote by Robert Collier, it says, "Always enter the conversation already going on in the mind of the prospect." And I think that just means like we have to have this deep understanding and empathy for the person that we, assuming we know that ideal person, who that ideal person is we want to reach. Now we need to really get into their life experience. And as experts, as we get more experience, we kind of, without realizing it, can distance ourselves from that understanding. And so it's being active and having those conversations and listening to the language and knowing what questions to ask, so that then all of that is reflected in the content. And so often we're so excited about our solution and our expertise and want to get it out there. But if we talk about in the wrong language or too soon without first addressing what's going on for them, what are they actively aware of and waking up in the morning thinking about and looking for support on, and then maybe we can make our case as to like, oh, this is why my approach is the best approach for that. It's that double checking of, am I really entering that conversation going on in their mind? And if not, let me get out there and even do just half a dozen discovery interviews with people, just asking some really good open-ended questions to collect that information.
Yeah, I completely agree. Looking at that messaging, maybe you are being a little bit too vague with your messaging, so you aren't entering at the point at which they're thinking about this because things are a bit too vague, or maybe you're being inconsistent, so you do understand some of the conversations going on, but you're not being consistent in your messaging, so it's not becoming completely clear. So it's understanding that, isn't it? And then how you convey it, aligning with wants, needs, language. And so, as you said, I mean, there's nothing better than just talking to people direct from the horse's mouth and understanding from them what's going on in their minds to be able to create the content that would resonate. And I think there's lots of other things that you can do. There's Know Where Your Audience hang out, and I'm sure we're going to come on to this in at some point in terms of where you create content and the kind of content you create. But when you're doing that research to validate who your ideal clients are and therefore what's going on in their mind and how can you enter the conversation at the right point, as well as speaking to people, you want to just be looking at, what are they saying online? Are there forums where they're sharing all this information? About what's going on in their mind? Reddit can be a great place for that. A lot of people think of it as somewhere. Awesome. Yeah, it's not just conspiracy theorists and things like that. It's actually, there's some people really share what's going on in their minds over in Reddit, and then certain. The online world, I could reel off all sorts of places, couldn't I? LinkedIn forums, LinkedIn groups, Facebook, or, all the Discord communities, things like that. But if you're there as well, as you said, if you're going to enter the conversation, at the point at which, understanding what's going on in their mind and then entering it at that point, then you can speak to people in person. You can embed yourself into the different places where you can see conversations happening. Look at the conversations, take part in the conversations. And I think then when you are assessing that you truly know who these ideal clients are, and then you look at your messaging to see the alignment, you'll really start to understand whether you're being a little bit vague or a little bit inconsistent, or you're not turning up at the right places, and as you said, entering the conversation at exactly the right point. And perhaps you feel that you are attracting the people to become aware of you, but we start this by saying the prospects and clients don't seem to be right. So what's happening between the awareness and coming down the funnel that the slightly wrong people are qualifying through and like the right people might be getting lost? So you need to look at the different types of content as well. And I'm sure that's something that you must find, with people that you work with as well, that there's maybe a bit of sort of loss of the right people through certain levels of the funnel, and you need to kind of work out what's going wrong at those points.
Yeah, that brings up a really good point, is that like we mentioned, people might notice. And in fact, let me I have something to say about that. But for those who are tuning in live, in the comments, I'd love to hear Yeah, where are you seeing frustration with maybe not attracting some of the right people? Is it when you get on the call with them at the end? Is it, you feel you're not getting the right people on your email list? Or where is this frustration showing up for you, or questions that are coming up around not always attracting the right people? And I'd love to see some of what's on your mind so we can maybe address some of those things. But yeah, coming back to what you were saying there about content. Oh yeah, and the different points in the customer journey. For instance, before somebody gets on the phone with us, like they might have like stumbled upon our content initially. Maybe they end up following us on LinkedIn or our podcast or our email list. They're getting other content. Maybe they're attending a workshop, right? And so there's all these different touch points happening. And you might be doing a great job of grabbing attention here, but then somewhere along the line, yeah, there's a disconnect in the messaging. And so it's just not clicking in their mind that it's like, oh, this is the thing that I have been looking for, or this is something I really should address sooner rather than later, or yeah, I really see the level of value that this would bring to my life, to my business, and therefore the prices that this coach or consultant is charging are totally commensurate with what they would deliver for me. And so you mentioned, yeah, knowing where that might be breaking down. If you're not, so you might look at the content of your workshops, or the language of your calls to action, or the headlines on your and topics of your lead magnet. Each one of those is an opportunity to filter the right people in or out. And so it's not just simply the content on the front end, but it's also the content that you use throughout the entire customer journey or funnel, right?
Yeah. And I think that's where personalization can come into play as well, can't it? So you mentioned about like email lists. So you've worked hard and you've got people who you now have their email address, and you have the opportunity to stay in touch with them. So they've gone further along the funnel for you, and you are now able to communicate with
Right.
email. So personalization is great, isn't it then? So have ways that you can segment the different people who are on your list, and have different versions of the ways that the emails that you send, so that it becomes more and more personal towards them as you find more about them, so that it's not just the same email. That the messaging could get a bit lost, maybe it's not quite aligned with them. Segment your audience as well, I think, and a great way to do that is with your email, because that's how we, when we get found, and then people like us enough to give them their email address, they want value from us, they want to hear from us. So if that can be personal as much as possible as an email can be, that can be really powerful as well.
Right. I have a question here in the comments that you might have some insight on, Amy, since you help people repurpose through lots of different channels for visibility and attracting their audience. And Amelia here's talking about how, and I know Amelia, and she's got a great following in terms of like size and engagement on TikTok. And she's feeling frustrated because it feels like social media is just bringing her a lot of freebie seekers. Like they love the information, but when it comes time to buy anything or anything above, just a minimum level, that they're not ready to, or they're seemingly saying, I'm not able to afford that amount, which is, probably true for some people. But have you seen that with any of your clients and working with people, like that whole idea? Because this is not the first time I've heard people complain about that. It's like social media just gets me freebie seekers. Is that true? Or is there something there that can be done to also try to tease out or attract more the people who might be buyers as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, it is going to be the case, isn't it? Because it's such a broad audience, and we're using social media. Like, for example, you mentioned TikTok, and TikTok's a social platform, but also, it's a search platform now as well. People go to platforms like TikTok and Instagram to search. And so it kind of crosses over to what people would have gone to Google for, and what I mean by that is that it's not how people used to explain, where you get found on search and then, you build your community and nurture your audience through social, because sometimes people are finding you for the first time because they're using the social as a search engine. So I think it's only to be expected. And I guess what we've seen really help is that when you are providing things for free, as we do on social media, I think it comes back to when you really understand who you are wanting to attract, and you've gone through that list, and you know what these red flags are, that are the people that you don't want that are coming through, and you're really clear on what they want. I think the things that you offer up for free, to just make sure that it's so specifically aligned to solving a problem of a very specific problem. Like, the specificity, I think, is key, of the people who tick the boxes in the right category, you know, and kind of eliminate some of the people that you see that just seem to be coming to you. So I think the things that you offer for free, trying to make them as closely aligned. And I've made the mistake before where, you know, the things that I've offered up for free have been really helpful, but then when I've assessed why do these people just take that, want more things for free, and then not kind of convert through, I realized that it's because the problem that I solved was only that it was the problem for the free the free seekers. I didn't see that it was actually solving the problems of, you know, the types of people and the levels in companies. So it wasn't surprising. There was a misalignment. So I do think that trying to align as much as possible and being, I suppose, therefore confident and bold in the decision, that you're probably not going to get as many people taking some of this free help, you know, because you actually try not to cast the net as wide and then just be left with the people who are freebie hunters and actually cast the net shorter. So I guess what, like, a good example is, I see a lot of scorecard marketing. So, you know, the thing that you're offering up for free is to take some kind of test, quiz, scorecard. Everyone loves a quiz, don't they? Especially if they think that they're really good at something and the quiz is going to tell them that there's something missing. Things like that are great because you can make it so specifically aligned to measuring, you know, certain traits, a certain, you know, whatever it is within your industry and what you do, but something really so specific that only really the people that I work with are going to want to do that test and find out where they stand on that or that kind of thing. So I think that, you know, that kind of test, quiz, scorecard marketing, things that an average person probably isn't going to take that, but a person who's serious is, and they're going to want to know the answer to those. So it's, you know, I suppose there's quite a few different answers to that, but what do you think, Jason? Because, like, I do think, like, not being bold with not giving too much for free and knowing that it'll be less people, but more specific people that take your free content, well, your free downloads and lead gen is probably a good starting point.
Right. Yeah. And a couple things that I would add to that goes along with what you just shared there is, okay, so a couple things come to mind. Number one, I want to say is that this, you know, adjusting your content and your messaging to go from, you know, people who don't seem to quite, like, it's not, things aren't firing on all pistons, so you're not quite consistently getting the right people, to fixing that, it's a bit of a iterative process of experimentation, right? So as an example, like I know that with Amelia, she's also shared with me that that she's noticed. So Amelia does you know, herbal medicine, foraging for plants, natural health remedies, things like that. And she's noticed also that some of the people who do buy are like nurses, for instance, right? And so sometimes if we look at, like, okay, well, who has bought? Even like maybe you're not getting as many buyers, as many consistents, like, okay, well, who has bought? And what can we learn for that? So then maybe we feed that back into trying something else specific for that audience, to try to attract more of them, or, you know, tease more of those people out and identify them within our audience. And so, you know, you test and then kind of check in and see where it's working, and then come and test something again. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. Another thing that I wanted to point out, because yeah, like, assessments are great as a lead magnet for all the reasons that you said. And to go along with that, I think that, you know, one of the things that can happen is that if people feel like, yeah, they love our content, if they feel like they're getting just that hit of like, oh, I'm getting what I need, whether or not it's actually true, or whether or not they really can go and apply it. And hopefully, you know, I do think we should be giving out content that can show people that it makes a difference and it can have an impact in their lives. But if they feel like they've got the whole enchilada, then they may be like, okay, awesome, I'm just happy to tune in and I'll be fine. And they don't actually realize, okay, there is a rest of the process here that I need to go through to really get to where I want. The solution, one of the solutions to this, is to have a signature method that really spells out, it's like, hey, if you're this kind of person who wants this kind of outcome, here are the steps or the pillars, or, you know, and especially if it's like a diagram or something, to get you, you know, here's where you're at, here's where you were, and you've made some progress. Now here's where you want to get, and here's what might be holding you back and the steps to get you there. So people can assess against that, you know, going back to your suggestion of assessments, but then also if you're continually showing that, they can see it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I have picked up some really great tips about these early steps or this one particular pillar, but I can see there's this rest of this process that I can dive into that I need. And so, that's where they'll want to dive. That's one thing that might get them to want to dive in and go further, is they actually see the roadmap. And so when we are giving that free content out to help people see that it works, we can focus on that front end of like, okay, what's one little step or one little thing that might be holding them back that we can help them with to get them some momentum, to show them that we do have an effective path and that they're capable of making it happen. And then, that's going to be valuable for them to bring them into our world and keep them there and start earning trust. But of course, at some point, to get the rest of the steps, we deserve to get paid for that value that we offer. So that's one thing that came to mind in addition to what you shared there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I was just going to, like, my mind was whizzing when you were saying that, because I was just thinking of an extra thing to say, which is that when you are sharing that and you are sharing, your signature process and what you do and the steps that you go through, one of the best ways as well to do that is to share it through the people that you've worked with. So sharing those stories, like real life stories, because people resonate and remember things more if they can picture themselves in that story, don't they? The things that I remember the most is where I've heard a story of someone just like me, and this is what happened, and I can just imagine being that person, and I have that problem, and hearing a real life story. So when you're sharing that, your signature process, your methodology, and the steps that you help people through, getting the people that you've worked with, your customers, things like that, to share how it helped them and come from their mouth, like user generated content, style. It really, really, really helps to do that as well, doesn't it? Help to put them in the story. Like, we want content to enter the conversation at the point at which they're thinking what we need, but also if they can picture themselves in the story because you share your outcomes through other people. And I think that, like, the not selling, the freebie seekers, so people who are just getting lots of your free content, sometimes it can also be the case that people worry so much about being salesy on social, and we're there to add value and be helpful, and it's just not right to kind of turn up and just be selling, because that's not what the platforms are. But people worry so much that they actually do forget to say in the first place what they actually do though, and what they solve and things like that. So again, sharing those stories through the people that you work with and the clients and the customers that you've had will help even more. And then if it can help by showing that you have this secret sauce and this methodology and this is how you've helped them and things like that, then the right people will picture themselves as the person within that story that they want a similar experience, and the wrong people will stay with the free stuff, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go to a question here, because I'm sure this is something that a lot of people deal with. The challenge Rich is saying, we don't seem to be growing our email list. And that can be, frustrating. You're putting out content, you're networking, you're doing all the visibility things, but the email list just isn't growing. And I think I want to give a quick checklist of things, some of which we've already talked about here, to check with that and then add on. So, as a summary of the things that we've talked about so far, of course, the first one is to make sure you really understand who that ideal client is, and you've done some of that research to make sure you're entering the conversation going on in their mind. And I have a couple more things I'll share about that here in a moment. When it comes to growing your list, of course, often there needs to be, first of all, you got to get in front of enough of the right people. So that's one thing to ask yourself. Am I using the right marketing channels? Do these marketing channels actually reach the kind of people that I want to reach? And am I doing enough, consistently enough, to get in front of enough of those people that a certain percentage and to go, yes, I'm raising my hand. Tell me more. This looks interesting. So that's a little bit of an audit you can do. Then the next thing I would be doing is thinking about, okay, well, what is what I call the messaging hook that you are using to pull them in? And when I work with clients, we try to come up with 3 to 5 of these messaging hooks, which kind of goes back to something you said earlier, Amy, where you might have different segments of your audience, each who respond to maybe a slightly different language or hot button, or have, a slightly different goal or motivation coming in, but it's the same, you would ultimately help them all in a very similar way. But up front and gaining their attention, it's good to have these different messaging hooks. And so just as an example, I work with coaches who want to scale their business. So I have one messaging hook that is specifically around signature process and how it can remove them from being the one-on-one linchpin bottleneck in their business model, because that's what some people are worried about. I have another one, though, that is about messaging being off. And that's one reason why we're having this conversation today, because I know that that's another hot button point, right? And so for each of these different areas, I have another one about offers and making your offers more scalable. And I know that these are each of the top of mind concerns that different parts of my market might have. And so I have lead magnets and workshops and things that I'm, continually saying, and I just kind of cycle through those over time, because I know that and test them, because I know those are the things that are going to consistently attract the right people. And it is a bit of a testing thing. Sometimes I try something out and it doesn't work, nobody responds, or it doesn't attract quite the right people, and that's okay. That tells me something and I can work off of that. So that would be another thing, Rich, is like, making sure that you have that invitation. It could be, the case study, the lead magnet, the tool, the resource, the assessment. It could be a workshop. Sometimes it can be getting directly on a phone call with you, though sometimes that's a little too soon for people. And they're like, whoa, I'm not ready to talk to you yet. I still want to know more about what it is that you do. And then being clear, which you talked about this too, Amy, it's like, is your call to action, are you making the call to action, and is it actually clear, and are you doing that consistently enough? So there's a little checklist for people. Ideal client profile, enter the conversation by figuring out the messaging hooks that are going on in their mind, and then make sure that you're showing up in the right channels and consistently using clear calls to action to bring them in. I had a couple other things I want to share, but let me pause there and see if that's bringing any thoughts or anything that you would want to add to that, Amy.
Yeah, I think I can probably help tack a few extra things on there, which would be maybe some tactical things. So let's say, I'm assuming like you're struggling growing your email list, so you have an email list. I'm assuming maybe you send, let's say, a weekly email or an email every 2 weeks or something, but some kind of regular communication with this email list. So there are little tactical things like, for example, the people who are on your email list at the moment, there's a high likelihood that they are networked with and know similar people, and those similar people probably could benefit from being on the email list as well. So I suppose phase one is do check that you are adding value, do that check-in and just make sure that there is some kind of whatever the frequency works for you, but I think maybe just some kind of valuable email that is helpful and useful every, maybe minimum monthly, but hopefully a lot of people are weekly, we're bi-weekly. Tack little things on the end. So PS, if you found this email useful, it mean the world to me if you could forward it on to a few other people too, and let them know about this, or or ask them to subscribe. So like asking people who are already subscribers if they would try and help other people get on your list in whichever is the best way possible. But share the link and say if you could share this with other people. So sometimes just a bit of an ask once in a while is something that people forget. Then another thing is doing a little bit of an assessment of like exactly how are you expecting people to join the list, and everything Jason said of having, really clear calls to action and really aligned lead magnets, like things that you can add for value. But then is it obvious on the homepage, for example, like just to have a look through things like your website, go and look at your Google Analytics and see what are the most highest visited pages on your site, and then have a look and check that there is something there that is going to convert them to your email list. If it's at the bottom, move it to the top because it is your highest visited page. So make the most of that. So try and align things like your website traffic with getting people to convert with value and add to your email list. Simple things as well. I've had this conversation with quite a few people, and then when we really broke this down, we realized like they had big social media audiences, but they never mentioned that they had this valuable email that goes out every couple of weeks. Maybe brand the email as well, give it a makeover, like we call ours the Content 10X Insider, but give it a name and ask people if they want to become an insider, that kind of thing. So give your email a name, give it a bit of a brand, make it sound special, make sure you're mentioning it on social. So as well as the traditional kind of digital marketing lead magnets of having the things that you provide of value, they give your email address, they get it, they add to the list. It's okay to just tell people that the lead magnet is join our really valuable bi-weekly email. So I hope just kind of there's a few tactical things on top of that, because it's amazing when we decided 1 month we were going to do something about our list, did most of those things. And, my marketing person was like, we've got an extra 200 subscribers this month. Isn't it amazing that we just actually put some effort into it this month and did all those things? So yeah, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, some great tips. Thank you for those. Another thing I wanted to touch on here is I know that a lot of people, I wanted to mention a couple of things. Just going back to Signature Method really quick, if anybody wants a simple tool to get you started with that, just comment Signature Method below or send me an email, jason@jasonvanord.com, and I can send that to you. But yeah, I wanted to talk now a little bit. I know that sometimes people feel like they're not getting the right people or enough people on their email list because they're just not standing out. They're not sure how to stand out. They feel like they're just saying the same things as everybody else in the same field, right? And there are a lot of coaches and consultants, and coaching has really grown as an industry over the last few years, post-COVID. And so that's worth, I think, talking about, is like, how do you stand out when you're in a world that's noisy with a lot of other people who have a similar expertise, even though you know that you have your unique approach and unique expertise. So yeah, I just wanted to see if we have a couple thoughts about that, and I'll start by throwing over to you, Amy. Like, what advice do you give to somebody that's like, I just don't know if I'm actually standing out in my field at all?
I think a good place to start would be to speak to the people who have worked with you, as we've said that before, haven't we, when we were talking about messaging? But discovering, why did they choose to work with you? Like, what was the choice there? What made you different? You might think that something is quite different, that's a bit of a uniqueness, and they might say, to be honest, I had 3 discovery calls and all 3 of you did that, but what made you different was actually this. So I think speaking to the people who have worked with you, who have, parted money, given you money and worked with you, and finding out, like asking for really honest, from the horse's mouth, what made you different. Also peers and mentors. So I guess doing a little bit of research, if you're struggling to work out what your real uniqueness is and how you are putting that out into the world, speaking to people who've worked with you, your peers, your mentors, and also, really looking at, it sounds obvious, but your background, your journey, and your stories are what makes you unique as well. No one else has got the same stories and the same background as you. So I think initially, doing an audit to be extremely clear in your head and hearing it from other people too. So you're not just, it's not just in your head, but you've got to hear from other people that uniqueness and define from that, what does that mean your values are? What does that mean your purpose is? What's your mission? And have some statements around that. And then when you are starting to define a content strategy and where you're going to turn up and the kind of messaging that you're going to have and how you'll stay consistent with that messaging, really check that you are putting out there an alignment with these the values and the mission, and what you were hearing from other people is that secret sauce. So I'm sure you've got loads to say on this, Jason, but I think sometimes people look so much to things like online and social and the digital world, whereas actually it's the good old-fashioned conversations with people that truly know you that I think can often help you work out what's really unique about you and what you offer.
Yeah, often we do need that outside input or reflection, because we may overlook or discount what some of the things that really do set us apart, or our approach apart. A little framework that I use for this, and this is when I'm designing offers, this is when I'm designing messaging, coming up with ideas for content, ideas for lead magnets, whatever the case may be, is the 3 R's of messaging. And they're relevance, resonance, and remarkability. And relevance is one that we often know. It's like, okay, yeah, you need to be speaking to something, and we talked about this already, you need to be speaking to something that your audience is actively looking for and in need of. And so we speak to hey, what's in it for them? This is what I can do for you. This is what I can help you to achieve. And that's great, but that's just like the first step, and everybody's going to be doing that too. I can help solve problem X too. Resonance kind of gets into some of what you were saying there too. It's like, okay, you have also like certain values that you might stand for, things that that set you apart just because maybe they're a certain type of population that you serve really well, or you don't believe in this particular approach and you believe in that approach, and there's a segment of your market that's what they're really going to be most interested. So it's like, what do you stand for that your audience might also really stand for, whether that's directly related to your topic or not. So this is where it's like letting your personality and even your life like come forward and shine a bit, because people are looking for those little clues of, can I trust you? And research has showed us that trust is made up of likability, of credibility and likability. And often we lean so much into the credibility. I'm showing you that I'm really good at what I do, that we don't give enough of the reason to like, oh, there's this warmth and likability to you too. And they're like, oh, you're a parent just like me. Awesome. Oh, you believe in such and such values just like me. And that's really important for people to be able to pick up on those cues. That builds trust. And then the last one is remarkability. And this is where it comes back to those messaging hooks. We try to have a remarkability factor to every one of those hooks. And by that, I mean, like, what is that? There's a few different remarkability hook styles that work really well, but one that's an easy one that a lot of people can use is talking about like, what is that missing piece that a lot of the people that you help don't realize that they need, and they might not be hearing enough of out there. And it's positioned differently than the stuff that they might be hearing over and over and over again and are tired of hearing about. And so the example that I use for this, one of the examples I use is if you had an ADHD coach who works with adults who have ADHD, and they're looking for somebody to help them find the motivation to get more of the things done that they need to get done because they're tired of dropping balls in their life and having it cause problems, right? And so if you had these conversations with your ideal clients, you might discover a lot of things like, yeah, of course, that some of them explored medication and taken that, and that's helped. Some of them don't want to go the route of medication. Sometimes it's therapy. They've probably heard over and over again, try this plan or try that app, try that. And they've tried a lot of them, and a lot of them didn't work because everybody with ADHD has different approaches that are going to work well for them. So then they're really frustrated about those solutions. And there's this really interesting idea that I came across recently. I thought, this is a great remarkability hook because I hadn't thought of it or heard it put this way. And it gave me some like new hope of like, oh, here's something else I can add in. And that is an idea of dopamine hacking. And it's very simply just like helping, we don't have to go into all the details, but it's like coming forward and saying like, hey, what if there's this other way to find motivation that you need throughout the day without having to take more medication? Even if you've tried all the planners and the time blocking and all the other techniques out there that have, some of them worked and not for you. I'm going to teach you some basic ways that you can use your body's natural mechanism for creating motivation throughout the day and know how to hack your dopamine. And that's the kind of thing that, it will grab attention because it sounds different. It offers a new path and a new hope. And it's going to align with a certain segment of that market who is looking for that kind of understanding, maybe something that's a little more research-based. That's, not just, again, medication therapy and those things that, are valid, but that they've already tried or are doing already. So all of this comes back to relevance, resonance, remarkability. And those are like the three elements that I really try to make sure that content and offers all have, so that they maximize the ability to stand out and attract the right people.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I love that example that you gave where you said, like presented a problem and then even if as well, because that's you're showing the empathy and the understanding. That's so important, isn't it? I understand you enough to know that you've probably tried even if you've tried X, Y, and Z, like you really are like showing that understanding, like, yes, I have tried those things and stuff. I really like that. I love what you said about the like likability, the credibility, but also the likability. I think something that people struggle with sometimes with that, we can go all in on the credibility in terms of sharing our wins and our testimonials and feedback and this is the credibility because this is what I've done before and here's the proof. But when it comes to likability and it comes to creating content and content marketing, sometimes people really worry about what kind of content can they create, especially when it's coaches, consultants, it's all on you. it's for you to be the likable person. It's not a brand, is it? And you're the marketing manager trying to get people to like a brand. It's you. I think people struggle. I'm sure you find this too, but everyone's being told to create video content and go on short form content, go all in on video on LinkedIn, create videos for TikToks. People are being told to do podcasts. People are being told, to still, write really informative blog posts and things like that. Live stream. Why don't you go live streaming? That's where you should be getting that likability and authenticity quality from. And it can become overwhelming. And people then worry, what content can I put out into the world? And also people sometimes go down a route that isn't comfortable for them because what do you think as a person with your unique traits and abilities and the things that you're confident in? What can you put out into the world that shows you in the best light, and puts you across as likable? So that, if you are not comfortable on camera, if you just freeze at the camera, and you know that the content is just going to come across as a bit wooden, and you don't enjoy it one bit, then don't force yourself to do that kind of content, because you're not going to hit that likability. It's just going to be awkward for you and awkward for the audience, and it's not going to work. So I think it's, you have to bundle it up, don't you? And then work out, I get this, but then to put this out into the world, what's the best way for me to do that? And sometimes it's trial and error, but you don't all have to do podcasts. You don't all have to do video. If you come across in the most likable way, and you can get across all of that and more through just absolutely brilliant emails, LinkedIn posts, and articles that people will devour from start to finish, you're a brilliant writer, then you stick with writing. But if you're great on camera, then you go and get that camera out, and if you want to talk into a mic, you do you, basically, as long as you know that's where your audience hang out too. It's obviously got to be a link between what you're good at content wise and the platforms and your audience and what they like and where they hang out. But that sweet spot, that's where you can lean in on credibility and likability and really win, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so important. There are so many people who end up frustrated with their content because they feel like they have to do it a certain way. But like, we all have different strengths and preferences and values or whatever, and that all should feed into your content strategy. It's got to feel good to you. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. Let's check in the comments here, see if there's anything else that we can touch on. I think we've hit most of the stuff. So yeah, if there's any other last questions, we have just a couple more minutes here while we wait and see if there's any other questions from anybody. Amy, do you have any resources or things that of course, there's your Content 10X book was such a great resource. I've listened and looked through it in terms of like all the ways to repurpose and get the most from your content. But you also do so much as an agency, making content, getting content out there for your clients. But for those who are listening and liking what you're talking about here, what are some things that they could check out to check out your credibility and likability?
Yeah, no worries. Well, I guess that, the best place to go, so if you go to content10x.com, content10x.com, there's loads of free content. So if you are a freebie hunter and you want lots of free content, there's just loads. There's hundreds of podcasts, blog posts, webinars, you name it. It's been 7 years or so of creating lots of content about content repurposing, content marketing, and getting the most from your content. So, head on over there for lots of free content. And as you mentioned, I have a book, and there's the podcast, there's the book and a toolkit. So there's lots there to help people like really take this messaging and turn it into the content formats that work for you. And then if you'd like a bit more help, if you want to kind of take the free content a bit further and have more just personalized like support, probably the best place would be to check out our content10x.com /consulting page, because we can provide even just a 1 hour consultation to help work with you and sounding board and share what you've been doing and provide some help through to helping develop out a content calendar or a strategy or a plan. So really just, starting from the start and then bundling any kind of other additional support that you need. So I would say, head on there. And if you have a big asset, like you've got a podcast or a video or anything like that, and you want to repurpose it, but you just need someone to develop a plan of how to do that, that's the kind of thing that we can do. So everything you find is on content10x.com anyway.
Yeah. Awesome. Love it.
Cool.
And then, for those who've been listening, I mentioned signature method. That's something that if, that feels like it could be helpful for you. And there's so many things that it can do besides what I mentioned today. Go ahead and comment signature method below, or email me, jason@jasonvanorden.com, and I'll get you hooked up with a little worksheet that can get you started on that. Or if you like the messaging hook idea, similarly, I have a resource that can get you started. So just comment messaging hook or send me an email, and we'll get that all set up. This has been great. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining me for this conversation today. I just love your work and the way that you think about content. So I appreciate having your insight here today and the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great. There's nowhere I'd rather be right now, Jason. It's been really good. So thank you.
Awesome. And thanks to all those who were able to tune in and participate live. We really
Yep.
appreciate it. And for those who are watching the recording, thank you to you as well. We look forward to the next time we get to bump into you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.